Hello, this is James Tanner. Today we're going to talk about the changes being made to the FamilySearch Family Tree and, and analyze what kinds of changes are being made and how we should kind of react to those changes as they appear. Remembering that the FamilySearch Family Tree is a universal family tree that has that everyone who registers has access to make changes, to add information, and to correct information that's already entered into the tree. And if you're working consistently or maintaining your part of the FamilySearch.org family tree, you probably know that you can follow, it was previously watch, individuals who are interested in preserving. For example, here, Thomas Parkinson. Over here at the corner, it says following. If I click it, it says follow, which means I will not be following it. The consequence of following an individual is that on a weekly basis, if you have registered and put in your email address, FamilySearch will send you a summary sheet of all of the changes that have been made to your part of the family tree during that time period. Because the family tree is entirely user-driven and by its nature cooperative, any of your relatives could add content, change content, or delete content in any given week. So if you click on the star located, you can start receiving those notifications that come. And here's an example of some of those that come. Up here under the little bell icon up in the corner, you can see different categories of notifications from FamilySearch, and one of those is the tree. And here is changes to people you follow in my case, and I'm following 20 people that happen to have changes this week. If I wanted to see what kind of changes I had, I'm going to go back to the tree. And if we go up to the top of the menu item, you can see contributions. And in those cases, you can see the people you're following and how the numbers. Right now, I'm following quite a long list of people, but that also shows me, well, actually, over here, the number is 389, and out of those this week, there were 20 people who had changes made to them. When I get to after I got to the notification, I can view the activity. That gives me a list in more detail of all the changes that have been made. And this is cumulative up through the date of the record, the notice that was sent. On this side over here, there's going to be some names of people that have contributed that information. I'm going to zoom a little bit more, zoom into the record here, and got to go back. I'm going to zoom into the record here a little bit, and so you can see the individuals being changed and their information rather than, scrunch it down just a hair. There we go. So we don't focus on who did the changing. That's only important if you recognize some of the people as either being reliable or perhaps not quite as reliable. The changes fall into distinct categories, and you need to understand that not all of these are bad or unwanted. Some of them merely are kind of like weeds in the garden. They're unwanted and bothersome, but all you have to do is do something to in this case, pull the weed or make the change back or do whatever needs to be done to rectify the change that was unwanted. Got to be cautious here that you aren't operating out of a lack of information or using wrong information. It's very possible that the information that you have and that you have been received perhaps from your grandmother or somebody that passed down this information to you, that it isn't correct, and that the corrections can very well be correct. So you just you need to take care to not be quite so concerned. You only have to react or do something if you somehow have a concern or issue with the change that's made. If they're good changes and they're adding information, obviously you could thank the person, but you can also simply ignore any of the changes that you feel are inconsequential or aren't significant enough for you to deal with and have any information that you might not have had previously. The first one of these is to people who are that I would look at categories are people who I would call revolving door ancestors. You'll see there's a whole long list of changes here being made to this person, Esther Brownell. Now, if I need to look once again and consider who made the changes and the type of change that they are. But in each case, it may be something that needs to be addressed and maybe not. Maybe the change was already made back. So if I click on Esther Brownell's name and open Esther in a new tab on my browser, I can go to look at her sheet directly, and over here on the right hand side, there's a show all of the latest changes, and this gives us an explanation of exactly what happened. And in this case, somebody removed some legacy choices, but also someone deleted a relationship. And it says over here, restore, if we wanted to restore the relationship. We notice here that the husband that was deleted was the ID number ended in R2Z. If we go back to Esther Brownell, you'll see that she actually has a husband by that name, but his address is in 4JS. And so what has happened here, if we go directly to, if we go to Joseph Teff's record or husband's record and look at the same thing, the latest changes, we'll see that there was a merger of two Joseph Teffs who had the same approximate birth dates and information, and we're not the final person that has all of the resources. You can look at the deleted person, but they're deleted, so they're gone. But if you go back to Joseph Teff, the surviving one person, you'll see that there are 28 sources. So if we look at those sources, we'll see there's quite a long list of information about this particular person. So there wouldn't be a lot of controversy about whether or not another person was the husband of Esther Brownell in this particular case. So the first one, even though these people are called revolving door ancestors, for the reason why is because they have frequent changes. It's interesting that most of the changes are resolvable rather easily and quickly. So now we're going to go back and view all the activity in the changes and scroll down a little bit, point out another revolving door ancestor. Here's one in which is a different category. We'll go down here a ways on the list. This is someone who appears regularly. He's a passenger in the Mayflower back in 1620. And people have a tendency to change these regularly. And you might notice that the same person, if you looked, you'd see the same person made the changes for this person, the changes back for this person as did for Esther Brownell, who also happens to be a descendant of Francis Cook and Richard Warren, who were passengers on the Mayflower. So these are the kind of people that have these kind of revolving door changes that you'll see a lot of. If you start getting upset about these, it's not going to do you any good to be upset. You need to become very well educated if you want to jump in and try to keep them from being changed. But the number of changes will just continue until we run out of people who have not taken the time to learn about what's happening with these particular people and where the information can correctly be obtained. In this case, for the Mayflower people, there's the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, which has a website online, and they have published a set of books called the Silver Books, and the Silver Books contain 5 generations of all the descendants of all of the Mayflower passengers who survived that first year and had descendants. And so this is a particularly reliable source for information because it is sourced out to all of the original documents for these people. And if they're not in there and if the information is different than the Silver Books, there's very easy to match up the information and make the changes back. The second group of people that we like to look at are people that have people who are, I guess sometimes with good intentions, are what I call tidying up the list. Here's some people, the Samuel Linton entries, where the information, what's happening here is that someone has just spent some time tidying it up, deleting custom events, which are not really custom events or are wrong or whatever. Really doesn't change anything about the individual except may have deleted some information that was helpful. And so if there's some information that needs to be replaced, you can do that. That's another kind of weeding the garden situation where you might want to collect all that information together and put it back into the resources. But in a lot of cases, it's just simply correcting double entries or whatever. My position on these is that it's just fine, let them do what they want to do, but if they really do reduce the amount of information or remove information that should be recorded, then that information needs to be restored. So there's sort of a brief evaluation that goes on here. If you don't see anything that's significant, then you just don't have to do anything about it. Another category of records is this one right below, where sources are being attached. It's very, very obvious where these sources came from in a lot of cases. They've been restored from someone's list of sources. Here you see there's a lot of legacy sources. These are old sources, probably not actually sources because they probably don't give the information that needs to be added. So if we go to this person, to Amelia Jarvis, and jump over to her page, we can see that there are 74 sources. So it's inevitable that some of these are not really sources, like like Ancestry Family Trees, not a source. It's you could call it a compiled source, but it's not actually someplace where you would go to get information. It's really someone's user input rather than an original record. And then all these legacy sources, most of them have no information at all. or they once again come from, like this one does, from the ancestral file, which is also not an original source, but is totally user contributed information. So these kinds of sources solely have the purpose of perpetuating a lot of the traditional misinformation or wrong information that had accumulated over the years. So, there's one, you can look at it one way or the other. I could go back in here and delete all of these legacies as sources and simply send this person a notice that said, these aren't sources. They are compiled information and are not properly added as sources. I don't know that's being a little over the top. Additionally, there's one here. This is another compiled source, the millennial file, and that is also secondary, not even a secondary source. It's a compiled source, so it doesn't even have any idea who or where that information came from. There's plenty of other information here, so there's not really a concern about having a little bit of extra information in there. What we really focus on are the details of this person to make sure that none of the information about members of the family and marriages and dates and things like that have not been changed. Okay, the last area is where people put in actual incorrect information. So if we click out here, we can see right up here at the top, this is kind of where I started with, but Charles Parkinson had his parent relationship deleted, and that was because if we go back to Charles Parkinson and look, we'll see that there was simply added in a person that should not have been there, and it was and that way there was also an explanation that said that there's no birth or christening record without a birth record. We do not know the parents of Charles Parkinson. And if we go back to Charles Parkinson, we'll see that he has no parents. This is one of the end of the line situations, and that often turns into kind of a situation in the family tree when there's lots of discussion back and forth and people try to put in names. And the only thing we look for carefully is to see whether or not they have any substantiating sources that are contemporaneous with the people. So basically, as you go through this tree, you'll find that there's some variations on these types of changes. The only ones that we become concerned about to any extent are when people are added in when there's no true relationship, like an extra child or a parent that doesn't exist or doesn't have any sources. Obviously, there was a parent that existed. But on the other hand, most of the other things are sort of taking care of the details, making sure there are sources and other things that are valuable to as cumulatively adding information to the FamilySearch Family Tree. So that's kind of my analysis in this session, and I'll hope you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and we'll be having some more of these chats in the future.